We'll say good morning, I guess. Okay.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you. We're going to continue our discussion with the Agency of Transportation, Secretary Flynn and his staff, and we'll continue on our discussion. As we know, there's many areas to cover. There's a lot of different sections. Then we'll get into DMV later on in the week or next week, whatever the time calls for. But with that, Mr. Secretary, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair Mazza, and good morning, committee. For the record, my name is Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation, and with me today is the agency Chief Financial Officer, Lenny LeBlanc, and we're here to testify on the Fiscal 21 Budget Adjustment Act. So, Lenny, if you could please put the...
I believe that Liz is going to have...
Oh, Liz? Okay. Liz, can you put up, if you could please, the spreadsheet that has the section numbers on the left? I'm sorry, should have coordinated this with you before.
We can't touch a penny unless Lenny says it's okay. So we just so the committee
Okay.
knows.
I'm here. I'm sharing my screen. Oh, wait, let me just make sure. Joe Flynn. Okay, gotcha. So is it the funds
it's
transfer or the spreadsheet? It's a spreadsheet. Okay.
It's the Excel spreadsheet, please.
Yep, sure. Just, here we go. All right, let's see.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So really starting top right, working down, the first adjustments you see for the fiscal 21 budget is in the aviation section, section 901. This is a technical correction. Excuse me. This is a $26,240 correction. It's a correction in the transportation program to bring it in balance with the appropriations bill. The transportation program was reduced the fund by this amount in aviation, but the change was inadvertently not included in the appropriations bill. So this is just a technical correction to the aviation section. Below that, section 903.
Sorry, Liz, can you make it a little larger? I'm having difficulty reading the text. I'm having trouble reading everything.
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
Senator Kitchell, I just opened the documents on our webpage.
Oh,
You need to
okay.
read
All right.
what's
I can do
there.
that. I can do that then. Well,
Here we go.
So the next adjustment to the 21 budget is in program development, section 903. It's a $1.6 million add, and this reflects a mandate to us from last time in Act 154, the big bill, which the legislation required us to add back $1.6 million in spending for leveling were we to find any new federal money. So this particular section just complies with that requirement from the last session. The next session down, 907, this has to do with Amtrak, and it's a little bit of a convoluted story. Let me tell it in a way that somewhat deviates from the narrative, and then we can try to clean it up if necessary. Amtrak typically costs us $650,000 a month, but during the suspension, the cost of Amtrak has been $200,000 a month because we have commitments for equipment and things that are constant. However, those $200,000 a month payments have been paid out of credits the state had accrued with Amtrak due to its increased ridership numbers prior to the suspension. Those credits have paid that $200 a month suspended cost of Amtrak since we suspended Amtrak, and they will pay them through February. But after that, we will have to start paying an amount again to Amtrak. And what this adjustment of $3.35 million does, it reduces the appropriation for the estimated savings from the suspension of Amtrak. The total of $8.1 million was in the budget, was reduced to $800,000 of federal funds that are anticipated to cover the estimated $200,000 monthly cost for the period of March through June, meaning the end of the fiscal year 21. The monthly cost of the prior to the suspension, as I said, were $650,000, but the $200,000 was paid out of the credits. And if you'd like to talk about this, it is a convoluted process. It's a bit bumpy to tell the narrative, but that's the story. And so therefore that's the adjustment. I don't know if you'd wish to, if we can come back to that if you'd like. The next adjustment on the budget for 21 is section 910. This adds spending authority of $750,000 to the transportation fund for the Department of Motor Vehicles to address estimated additional costs they've had to deal with COVID-19. We've had to outfit the locations that have been reopened to the public with new plexiglass retainers, and we've had to hire additional cleaning staff to increase the frequency. There have been a lot of costs that weren't otherwise baked into the 21 budget as a result of dealing with the current pandemic and being open for business. So 750,000 of that 880 is for that. The remaining $138,000 is the adjustment to institute the body-worn camera program for the Department of Motor Vehicle officers. This is part of, really, I think we feel the unfinished business of S119, the use of force bill from last year, and started with the Vermont State Police. And it is getting rolled out through BAA for DMV and for wardens at this time. And looking, I think, also at liquor control and corrections, but I won't speak to that. But this would be for the law enforcement officers, the sworn officers at DMV. The next correction, section 910, is a revision from ANR's budget. I'm sorry, it's 919. The Municipal Roads Grant and Aid Program that was previously at ANR came to the Agency of Transportation in fiscal 21. However, the $650,715 of Clean Water Fund money was carried forward in the Agency of Natural Resources budget. This language simply adds that money to the Clean Water Fund at AOT. It removes it from the carry forward from the ANR budget. So that is, in a nutshell, the few corrections that the Agency of Transportation has in budget adjustment for the fiscal 21 budget. And perhaps at this point, it would be more helpful if you, yes.
Yes, Senator Berkeley.
So Secretary Flynn, that means there's no new money for the municipal program. That's just, money was there, just moving from ANR to V-Trans.
That's, yes, Senator, that's correct. The money was there. It all just didn't get sent to us because it had been carried forward. This portion was carried forward in their own budget.
Any other questions, comments on this section? Good. Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah,
Okay, Senator Kitchell.
I do. So if I'm looking at the section, you are talking about adding the federal money that was just appropriated in the last federal relief bill. So what, and it came out in a variety of components like, I can't remember, surface, transportation surface, block grant. There were a number of different components of the transportation piece of that bill. So what you're doing is requesting authorization of some of that funds through the budget adjustment, the release of some of that funding.
Senator, if you're referring to the $50.4 million that's coming through Federal Highway Administration that was passed by Congress less than 2 weeks ago, that will be reflected in our fiscal 22 budget that the governor delivers next week.
Okay.
So this is not that.
Okay.
Lenny?
Because it was made, a COVID relief bill passed in December of 2020. So that's why I was
Well,
wondering.
let me just, okay, let me look closer at that.
Lenny,
And
you
so
had a
that's-
comment? Go ahead.
Senator Kitchell is correct.
Okay.
This is requesting authority to add 1.6 million of the estimated 50.4 million
Okay.
of FHWA surface transportation funds.
And did that
I
come down
stand
in
corrected, sorry.
did that come down in a block grant, Lenny?
It comes to us similar to the way formula funds come to us. And actually, we got the exact number only this morning. It's just below 50.4 million. I don't recall exactly what it is. It's just under that figure.
Okay, so that, because that goes into a pre-existing fund, there's no need to do separate acceptance of that federal dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the same CFDA number, same programs that we typically get our annual funding in. They just added this special one-time pot to that.
Okay, all right. So there's still quite a bit more that will be reflected in your plan that you'll be presenting to us.
Correct. Yeah,
All right,
we'll present a full plan next week.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make clear, because we are trying to authorize some other money out of that bill for housing. And so I just wanted to be clear in my own mind of the funding source that was being referenced here. Thank you.
And just for the record, sorry for my error in reading that, Senator Kitchell.
Oh, well, it's okay. That's all I look at is numbers and
All right.
federal grants. So, all right, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Liz, I don't know if you want to put the narrative, there we go. So this, as you read this, the following amount shall be transferred from the general fund indicated to Forest and Parks, 1.2 million. Section 5, the amount shall be transferred from the transportation fund as indicated. So this is moving $200,000 from the TIB funds to balance the transportation infrastructure bond fund to the January consensus forecast that we just received. So this is just a transfer to TIB. And Liz, whichever one you want to
Yes,
roll
Lenny.
up next.
Lenny?
Oh, sorry.
I'd just like to clarify that this is new language we are proposing that was not in the original submission to the General Assembly by Finance and Management. And this came about as a result of yesterday's forecast that left the TIB fund, that reduced the TIB fund forecast by 200,000. So this is to balance the TIB fund in FY21.
And it's using general fund to balance.
No, it's using transportation fund. The paragraph 5 is what we're proposing to add here.
From the T fund. I'm sorry, I was looking at the top one, which
Yeah,
is for.
so we're using surplus T fund to balance the TIB fund.
Okay, because of the upgrade. Yeah. Okay.
Someone explain the transportation, the TIB fund, maybe for the members that what that exactly is.
Lenny, if you feel free, please.
The TIB fund, or Transportation Infrastructure Bond Fund, was established a number of years ago. It has limited uses. It can only be used for transportation infrastructure projects with a life expectancy greater than 10 years, or to pay debt service on bonds issued with payback from the TIB fund. So it's funded by a 3-cent per gallon diesel tax and a 2% assessment based on the retail price less all taxes of gasoline. When bonds are issued using TIB funds to pay back or TIB bonds to fund projects, those projects need to have a life expectancy of 30 years or more. In a nutshell, that's the TIP fund.
Thank you. Okay, go right ahead, Joe.
Okay, Liz, whichever slide you have next.
Can I, before you move on, Secretary?
Yes, please.
Is that okay?
Yes, Senator Strickland.
Did you say what, I didn't understand the first one, number 4.
Well, I shouldn't have read the whole thing. It's just appearing on the page. That's part of what confused the conversation. That's an A&R or Forest and Parks
Oh,
adjustment.
that's so nothing to do
We're
with.
looking at number 5,
Okay, I get it.
parentheses 5.
I get it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, just trying to see which one we're on here. It's small on this end too. Okay, this, so we're reducing by 4.1 million in transportation fund money and reducing by 3.2 million in federal funds. This section is being amended to be consistent with section 907 that was on our first slide. And just reading through this with you, Act 154 reduced the budget for Amtrak by $750,000 with the above language. Amtrak funding is now being further reduced by 3.35 million in transportation fund for a total of $4.1 million. Amtrak funding is also reduced by 3.2 in Fed funds. The remaining budget for Amtrak is now $800,000 in federal money, which we said will take us through to the end of the fiscal year. Amtrak has been paying down the $200,000 a month during suspension using credits for ridership that it had accrued while it was operating. And the remaining $800,000 of federal funds are anticipated to pay for the service suspension through June of 2021. And
So-
they are, I'm sorry.
No, so does that mean in terms of Amtrak, a T-fund support of Amtrak subsidy for the period of the disaster declaration, does that mean are we having to use T-fund or not for Amtrak subsidy? If
Well,
in this
through the-
fiscal year?
We have been paying off with the credits that were accrued through prior ridership numbers. But that credit bank, if you will, is empty in February. And the $800,000, we're anticipating that to be available through the COVID Relief Act passed, as we just discussed in December. So I think the answer, that the way I understand the question is, the answer is we'd be using the COVID money until the end of the fiscal year because of this adjustment.
All right, that was what because of the federal money coming in and because of the adjustments, in the end, we're not having to use any T-fund, state T-fund dollars in this
Correct.
area. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And then at the bottom of the page, this deals again with the reversion from A&R. As I said before, the Municipal Roads Grant and Aid Program that was previously at A&R transitioned to AOT in fiscal 21. However, the $650,715 that you see before you was carried forward in the A&R budget, and this just cleans that up and sends it over to AOT. And
I think that's all I
leave
have.
you, okay. That really, in summary, is the few adjustments in the transportation budget for fiscal 21.
Good
Happy
job.
to-
Not many transfers, not many. No. Okay,
Don't know if you have any other
any other questions
questions.
before we move on? Seeing none, go right ahead.
That, Senator, was all we were, my understanding is all we were scheduled to present to you this morning.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions before Joe leaves?
Just one comment, and that is Senate Appropriations will start taking testimony tomorrow on the budget adjustments. So as usual, we would like to have confirmation from the Transportation Committee that there's not a problem, or what's being proposed here is supported by us. So just wanted to let you know, we're starting that work this week. The House hasn't passed budget adjustment, but we kind of do testimony in tandem. And
Are you all right with it, Jane?
I'm fine with it. But I'd like to be able to convey back to the committee that the Transportation Committee has reviewed that section of the budget adjustment and supports the proposed changes.
Is that all right with the committee?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I know people think that I'm unanimous in this, but normally it's helpful to know
Don't
that.
steal our money and spend it somewhere else, okay? That's all.
Oh, you can trust me.
All right, anything else before we lose Joe and Lenny? Lenny, anything else you want to add?
No, Joe did a great job.
Okay.
Anything else we should know?
Yeah, any
could you,
surprises? No?
We're going to have Chris from Joint Fiscal come in and sort of give us a update. I think Liz has been talking to the chair about that, and so it'll be interesting to see how that money can be used to advance transportation goals in the state.
Yeah, we certainly got some, so okay. All right, if nothing else, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
We are waiting for Michelle.
Okay,
She planned to come at 9:30. I just emailed her, so hopefully she will arrive very shortly.
okay.
Maybe talk. Oh, do you want me to
Yeah.
put a break up until she comes?
We can do that.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Senator Chin, you had a question?
I was just gonna say, I think I followed most of everything there. I understand budgets from my previous work, but I'm not sure I could defend all of the things that were just presented to us. So I'm not gonna be asked to report any of these changes to the full Senate, am I? Because that would not be good for the Transportation Committee.
Yeah.
Wait till you have the whole T-bill.
Yeah, that's, we're gonna give you the whole e-bill. That'll be, as long as you're ready by Monday morning, that's all, yeah.
Senator Chittenden, the budget adjustment is reported out in its entirety by the chair of appropriations. So you can give a sigh of relief, but you'll have to rely on me to adequately present
Well,
it.
anything difficult, we give it to Senator Kitchell. Okay, I think we have, who did just join us? Did we
Can I
have?
ask?
Yes, go right ahead.
Raj, can I ask one question? of
Sure, go
Senator
right ahead.
Kitchell? Senator Kitchell, I should have asked it back in the, when we had both gentlemen last, that $200,000 payment that is recurring was just from, it's credits from ridership from the federal government, from Amtrak. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I believe it was described as a ridership credit.
We were above, beyond what our ridership should have been, I guess, and they give us a little credit if we go over, so
Okay.
it helps a little. I didn't realize that we had that accumulated. I knew our ridership was increasing just before they shut it down, so let's hope we get it back up there after.
But we have Michelle and Dan listening to our
Yes.
conversation, so I hope you would, are we understanding it correctly? I mean, we've heard of toll credits, but now Amtrak
That's right.
credits, huh?
That's right, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, Michelle, you're with us, and Dan, might as well continue on then.
All righty. Thank you very much, Senator, and welcome committee members. We're pleased to be able to talk to you this morning about the Division of Policy Planning and Intermodal Development, which includes our rail, aviation, public transit, policy planning, mapping, research, permitting groups.
Wow.
And
That's a mouthful right there.
it's a lot. It's a lot. First up this morning, Dan DeLapere is going to talk about our rail and aviation group. It's a combined bureau, as most of you are aware. And Dan can answer any questions you have about the payment cost structure we have with Amtrak as it relates to the ridership credits that we get and that
Okay,
sort of thing. And then we're going to have Ross McDonald come in and talk about public transit. And then Joe Segali will talk about the Policy Planning and Research Bureau. And Amy Tatko, who's our public outreach manager, will talk about our public engagement processes that we go through across the agency. So unless there's any questions for me, I am going to pause myself and let Dan take it over.
Thank you, Michelle. Go right ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you guys again. For those of you who don't know me, Dan DeLabriere, I'm the Rail and Aviation Bureau Director for VTrans. So again, we have rail and aviation in my bureau, and I'm going to go through some PowerPoints with you today to talk about just sort of the overview of what we do, what we manage, and that kind of stuff. So Senator Ingalls, nice to see you. Russ and I know each other from.
Good to see you, Dan. Very good to see you.
Dan,
Yeah.
can you tell us anything about him that we don't know, or help us
Oh,
out?
Easy,
I can-
easy,
I
Dan.
can tell-
Easy, easy,
I
Dan.
can tell you
easy.
stories. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd have to get to Senator Mazza's garage and a couple beers flowing, and it'll all come out. It'll all come out.
The problem is, Senator, that if I tell you stuff about him, he's going to tell you stuff about me, and I'm
That's right.
not sure that's going to go well. So,
Yeah, we got a Northeast Kingdom pack going here. We're all good, Dan. We're good.
all
Go right
right,
ahead.
I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. I don't know, if Liz, if you give me permission or not.
Hold on, let me do that for you.
Okay.
You're all set.
All right, let me try this. I tried this the other day and it didn't quite work. So let me, not working.
I'll help you. Give me 1 sec.
Okay. I don't know why. This happened to me last time too. It couldn't quite share. I don't,
I'm stuck in a screen, but I should have 30 seconds.
or if you want to run my PowerPoint, that's fine too. We can start with Rail. The ones I sent you.
Yeah, hold on 1 sec. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so just tell me when you want me to move the slides.
Okay. So yeah, so that's the cover sheet, although I can't see for some reason, I can't see the whole thing. Okay, so if we go to the first slide, or the second slide, I guess, which is not on the cover page. All right, so railroads. What does it mean to Vermont and the impacts of railroads in Vermont? So I put up this map on the side to kind of show you how Vermont plays in the railroad game here. We're pretty important. And the reason why I say that is because the way Vermont is set up, we're kind of right in the middle of a lot of very big transportation ports, like up in Montreal and across the Atlantic seaboard. There's a bunch of ship ports that come in, and we take a lot of shipments off that, and we move a lot of that freight through Vermont. That affects Canada and a lot of the eastern seaboard. So yeah, so we're in the network nationally and internationally. And if you look at all the other railroad networks, particularly like New Hampshire, there's some railroads there, but they don't connect. They kind of go up a little bit and then they're cut off. So there's a lot of freight that comes through Vermont that goes to different places across Canada and the US. So there's about 150 to 200 rail cars that move in Vermont every single day. And if we didn't have railroads, that would kind of translate into about 600 to 800, depending on the day, additional tractor trailer trucks that would move the amount of freight that moves on a railroad every single day. So that's quite a bit. Vermont Rail Systems is a Vermont-based short line railroad out of Burlington, and that's who we lease the infrastructure that we own, the state owns, to. And they move about 90% of what they move in and around Vermont either starts at a Vermont business or ends at a Vermont business. So railroads are good for the economy in Vermont. And they provide them really good jobs. I mean, there's about 225 approximately, railroad jobs in Vermont that are Vermont-based jobs. They're good paying, good benefits. So they're good for the state. And also the shippers and receivers, like, grain, salt, fuel, those heavy commodities. Railroads provide a very competitive pricing model to move all that stuff in and out of the state. A lot more competitive than some of the trucking companies because a lot of the stuff goes long haul. And then of course we have our passenger rail service. We have 2 passenger rail services that Ethan Allen and the Vermonter. All right, next slide, please.
Senator Mazza, can I ask a quick
Yes,
question?
go ahead.
Dan, the classes that you have on there, that's just based on revenue?
Okay, so this is where railroads get a little bit confusing. So someone says, oh, well, they're whatever class railroads there are. And then there's also a terminology, say railroad class tracks. So sometimes you can have a class 2 track on a class 1 railroad or class 2 railroad. So yeah, so there's essentially 6 class 1 railroads, and class 1 railroads are the big guys. They're the ones that have, I can't remember the number, but it's like $550 million in revenue or more annually. It's probably on that last slide. I just don't have it. But anyways, yeah. So that's based on revenue, and that's the FRA classes. They classify the size of the railroads. So I can't zoom in on that, but it's.
Does it matter to us? I guess it's a question because I'm used to the classifications based on like weight, but this is by revenue. But does it matter, or is it just some federal definition that doesn't really have?
It's a federal definition. Yeah, it's a federal definition that the FRA kind of groups railroads into, because class 1 railroads have they have a little bit different safety standards than others. Like if you have because they know they're going to move more freight, they're moving more things, so they have to kind of live up to a different safety standard than others. A lot of the class 1s, for instance, are required to have like PTC and things like that. So whereas smaller railroads, short lines, don't always, they get the waiver for PTCs, for instance. That's just one example. So class 1, I can't see it because my face is in the way.
Okay, well that's I had another quick question on that map. It makes it look like the Montpelier to, I guess maybe that's St. J line is intact. If you follow the lines on that map. Oh no, I get it. Montpelier's over there. Never mind. I get it.
I can read the class 1. Would that help anybody or everybody?
No, that's a fine. I was just wondering how it differed from the other classes. So I'm good. Sorry to take the time.
All right, so let's just talk about Vermont a little bit and what we have. So as you can see in Vermont, we've got the solid lines. Those are the active rail lines, and then the dashed lines are rail banked and are now, a lot of them are rail trails. So total in Vermont, we've got 578 miles of active railroad, and the state of Vermont owns 305 miles of the active rail line. So we own over half of the active railroads in the state of Vermont, and 273 are privately owned. So out of the 300, we have 305 miles of active rail. We have 149 miles of rail bank property, and that's, the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, Missisquoi Valley, BB Spur, and the Delaware and Hudson Trail. So we own 4 actives and 4 rail bank properties. On the active rail lines, there's 172 bridges. We actually own about 214, but we, because we lease out our active rail lines, we're responsible. And why this is important, and I'll talk about it in a minute. is 172 of those bridges are the responsibility of VTrans, essentially, to inspect and report those to the Federal Rail Administration. And the other piece that we have is a 422 rail crossings. So if you a grade crossing on a state highway or a town highway, there's 422 public rail crossings that our program has to manage on an annual basis. All right, next slide. I talked a little bit about this. We have two intercity passenger rail routes, Amtrak routes, and this is our current. This is currently where we go. So we have the Vermonter route, starts in Washington D.C., comes up through New York City, comes into. Oh, we got to go back. Going a little further. Oh, right. Yeah, that's good. So it comes into Vermont and southern Vermont, and then comes up to White River, and then terminates. The Vermonter terminates every night in St. Albans, and then the Ethan Allen starts in New York City, comes up through New York, and then comes in over in Whitehall, comes over into Castleton, and ends and terminates in Rutland every day. And then so we have a southbound and a northbound route on each one of those. So we have a train that leaves St. Albans in the morning and a train that leaves Washington, D.C. in the morning. And they meet about Springfield, Mass. That's where they sort of connect. And then actually a little bit south of that, but that's about where they meet. And then so we've got one in each direction on both trains. And again, the Ethan Allen comes from New York City and Rutland. So that's our current Amtrak routes.
I might add at this point, we are working very hard for the new senators to get to Montreal. We've been working for years. We know how important that'll be for ridership. But Dan, tell us if you got a minute just about the problems we're having with Canada to get a train into Canada.
Okay, so pretty complicated issue here. We've been, as Senator Mazza said, we've been working for years on this. This is, if it was easy, we would already have done it, but obviously it's complicated and not easy. We think that the Vermonter, and this is actually, I think, part of one of my next, is it my next slide on our goals? I think it is our next slide, yeah. Okay. So you can see that the red line on top. So basically we want to get from St. Albans up into Montreal. And we think that this is going to connect a very large population base to New York City, to Washington, D.C. It's going to create a lot of Vermont opportunities for Vermonters to go to Montreal. So what has to happen? So a couple of years ago, or I guess, yeah, it's been a couple of years now, the feds passed a bill that basically says that we can do pre-clearance. And what that means is the train does not have to stop at the border. So the reason why we don't run there now is because basically, if you go to the Canadian border, the train would have to stop. Custom Border Protection folks would have to get on the train, clear everybody, sweep the train, do all that. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half. And that's what happens on the Adirondack over in New York right now that goes to Montreal. And it's not real competitive. I mean, if you were going to go from St. Albans to Montreal, you wouldn't want to take the train and sit at the border for an hour and a half to get cleared. You could be in Montreal in about 2 hours. So you wouldn't take the train. So anyway, pre-clearance is the key to this. So we kind of got federal legislation passed that said that the two countries can work together. So the next step is, okay, we're allowed to work together, but what does that mean? And there's a lot of details to this. There's specifications on a actual station that both the U.S. Border Protection folks and the Canadian Border Protection folks have to agree on. So that facility has to be built to that spec. So it meets both of those agencies' criteria. And what that would do is that would allow the train to leave St. Albans and not stop again until it's in that that facility in Montreal that is secure. And so basically it's just like an airplane. You get on the plane, then you fly into a different country, you get off the plane, and then you go through customs when you get there, or you go through customs before you get on the plane, you get into the US and you're already cleared. That's the idea for the train here. Montreal Station is very complicated. It's a multi-level building, has, I believe, 4 now. There was 3, but I think that's, no, it went the other way. There were 4, now it's 3. There's 3 different landlords that we'd have to deal with to build this facility and negotiate with them. There's some track improvements north of the border that need to be made so that the train can travel at a speed that people can't, you can't slow the train down so people can get on and off. That train needs to be moving fast enough so that border protection folks are satisfied that people can't get on and off and on a moving train. Like coming into town, certain towns, it won't slow down. You need to upgrade the track so the train can move at a speed that they can't get on and off. So there's a bunch of that stuff that has to happen. And to complicate it, the Quebec government is not allowed to spend their dollars on a private freight railroad, which is what we would be running on. So how do we pay for all this stuff? So all of it, as you can tell, a lot of this is pretty complicated. We have been working on it for years. We've had meetings. Now this past year, COVID, we kind of took about 8 or 9 months here on COVID, and we kind of stopped working on this. We have in the November-ish timeframe, we started having meetings again about this. The good news is that both the Canadian government and the US government are still on board to get this done. We are all talking about this being a priority. On the Canadian side, they're moving this project out of their transportation agency and moving it into their, I'll use our Vermont analogy. We have a buildings and general services. They're going to take this project out of their transportation side and have the lead be their BGS like we would be. So what that's going to do, we think that's going to help because BGS there will be able to move their station construction forward a lot quicker. And I think they're going to have some different funding available to them too. So anyway, long story short, we took a break. It's complicated, but we're back on track as far as moving it forward. VTrans has retained, a lot of our ex-secretary Brian Searles. We still have retained Brian Searles to help us out because he has a lot of political contacts on the other side of the border. So long story short, I don't know what our finish line is or when it's going to be. I will give you the 3 years, but that's not really what we think. It's we don't know.
We always used to hear 2 years. Remember that, Jane?
But the good news is we're moving. The bad news is, we still got a long way to go. But it's a goal of the agency, and it's a good goal because it will make the Vermonter train just a fantastic train. So it's what we need to do. All right, so that's one of the goals, is to get it to Montreal. The other goal is to get the Ethan Allen, which currently terminates in Rutland, get that one to Burlington. So the good news on that is, while we're not at the finish line, we feel like we can see the finish line. We were fortunate enough to have a few grants over the years. We had a Jeffords earmark. We had a Tiger 5 grant. We have Tiger 7 grant. And we've had some other federal highway funds for crossing improvements and things. Long story short is the projects that are going to get us to Burlington, the construction projects, we're hoping to have completed around the end of this calendar year. And then we can start, and we already started, we're working with Amtrak already, but what has to happen after the infrastructure is completed, so the actual tracks and crossings and platforms, those things are upgraded. Then we have to actually train Amtrak crews to safely operate on the new tracks because it's called qualifying the crew, and that takes a while. They have to run the train for so many hours. They have to physically stop and start at all the platforms and know how long that takes and the braking distance and all that stuff before they're allowed to actually put passengers on the train. So long story short, we're hoping first quarter of 22 that we'll actually see the Amtrak Ethan Allen, and that's a ballpark time, but we'd like to think that the Ethan Allen will be rolling into Burlington Station sometime in 2022. So that we can see the finish line. We're just not quite there yet.
Senator Mazza,
Yes,
may I ask a question?
go right ahead.
I just want to also state, I think there was a setting that was preventing people from unmuting themselves, but I believe Liz just corrected it. So now we should be able to unmute ourselves. So my question, Dan, is it Director Delabrouillard? I want to pronounce it.
Delabrouillard. Yeah,
Delabrouillard.
Delabrouillard. Yeah.
Just to put in context, one of your opening slides about how important rail is, you stated the 200 carts takes 800 tractor trailers off the road. Do you have a rough estimate of how many tractor trailers are on Vermont roadways on a daily basis, just so I can understand the proportion of rail moved goods relative to what is using our interstate roadways?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not. I'm in the rail section, so I don't keep track of that number. And I'm not.
EMB probably would.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody might that, but I do not. I apologize. I don't have that number.
I can give a little background on that. In the T-bill that we have done for the last couple of years, we've tried to specifically quantify where investments are being made to promote carbon reduction. And so that's why we were, it's a good question. I just wanted to say that we wanted to connect the investments that we're making in rail with the reduction in truck traffic, both in terms of carbon emission and obviously wear and tear on the highway. And so just to give a little context about why we had focused on that particular piece of data. And if you go back to the T-bill from last year and the year before, you'll see at the beginning of a bill a very long listing of the ways that we have invested transportation funds to advance the goal of carbon reduction. And that was one of them. So that's why we were trying to equate our investment in rail and of course, obviously the investments in getting our bridges all up to the 286, is that the right weight load?
Yes, 286,000 pounds.
Yeah, as part of this, as part of our overall strategy to reduce carbon emissions in the transportation sector. So just to give the new committee members a context of why we had placed some attention on that particular piece of data.
And do we see those efforts being rewarded? Do we see an increase, Director, in the uptick in more freight being moved because of those efforts?
Yes, I'll give you a perfect example. For the new members, you'll hear me talk about 286,000 pound carloads. That is the new industry standard, and I say new, it's been around for a while. But when railroads were built, 100 some odd years ago, they weren't built to carry that heavy a car. And 286,000 pounds is what an individual car plus its freight would weigh. And our limiting factor is a lot of these 100-year-old bridges that they have to travel across. So we've applied for a few grants to upgrade some of the bridges that we have around the state. The build grant is our most recent one that we're in design. It's just starting design now. There's 31 bridges between Rutland and Bennington, actually all the way to Hoosick, New York, that need to be upgraded. So, Senator, to answer your question, our largest in-state freight customer is Omnia, which moves it's down in the Pittsford area. Yeah. And so they move we move cars every day out of the quarries there, and forever and ever and ever we could only do 263,000 pound carloads because our bridge number 219 was our limiting factor. Well, a couple of years ago, we finished Bridge 219 to upgrade to 286,000 pounds. So the largest freight company, or the largest freight moving on railroads, now can haul 286,000 pounds out of the state every single day. So instead of sending, either half-loaded 286,000 pound cars or smaller 263,000 pound cars, they can actually load those cars all the way, which reduces their freight costs. So these companies can be more efficient. So so yes, to answer your question, yes, there's direct correlation between what we're doing and the efficiency of moving freight on railroads.
We have a good working relationship with the Vermont Rail, and together we've been able to upgrade the tracks and bridges, and working together to maintain that railroad. Thank God we kept it over the years, because it's coming back, I think, better than ever in the future. I remember when Howard Dean first started talking about the silent rail crossings and down through Burlington, Shelburne, Shalott, and it was a very difficult thing to get through at that time. And thank God we did that. And our last big project was the Middlebury Tunnel, which we just heard about the other day. That was a huge project, which has been completed. So we are now prepared to have Amtrak and plus all the freight on that lines, which will it'll be amazing to get on a train in Burlington and head to New York City in 6.5 hours or whatever. And I think it's going to be a tremendous asset for rail, and it's coming back better than ever. So just a little side information there. Go right ahead. All right, Senator Perchlik.
Dan, did you say the goal for to get the train from Rutland to Burlington was spring of 21?
22.
Spring of 22. That's
Yeah.
Okay.
A year, about a little over a year from now.
Okay, great. And then on the map where you have the first priorities and second priorities, are those, when you have the second priorities on both the Vermont line and the Ethan Allen line, are those actual other lines or just an additional train?
So I stole this map out of another report that was so this was more just to show you the map and not to show you the first and second priorities. This was out of a rail study that was done many years ago. So I'm hoping you just refer to the map and not the criteria at the bottom in the grid there. But I was trying to show the expansion of the Ethan Allen and the Vermonter.
Okay, so it doesn't have prior. And then is also I forget what the Adirondack or whatever the New York train is. That goes also from Plattsburgh to Montreal, or it can if we fix this whole Montreal station issue. So we have like New York also working with us with Quebec.
Yep. Yes. So we're partnering with Amtrak, the province of Quebec, and New York State to hopefully get this pre-clearance facility, because you're right, the Adirondack train, which currently stops at the border every day, will not have to do that anymore. It'll come into the exact same track in Montreal as our train will and unload. And track 23, we already have a track. We already know, I've been there several times, track 23. It's going to be a great spot when we're done. So yeah, I can't wait to get to Montreal.
When are we going to be done? I'm the chair. I was muted and couldn't unmute until, fortunately, I sent Liz an email and she unmuted us. How long have we been working on it, Dan? Some of us feel like it's pretty glacial. Has it been? When did we start having this?
I started when I first got there, so that gives you an idea how many years it's been. I can't wait to ride that first train, I'll tell you.
So,
I know we were told 3 years, but I think that 3 years was up.
So I've been with the agency over 10 years, and it was going on before I was even at the agency. So so Senator Kitchell, 3 more years, I'm sure. 3 more years.
Chris Cole said that many years ago.
I know, but he said 3 years to everything, didn't
Yeah,
he?
he said 3 years to everything.
So I don't know the answer. The honest answer is I don't know. We've got a lot of hurdles to get over. We've crossed a lot, but we still have a more to go. So I'd hate to tell you when, because I don't know. All right, next slide, if we could get there.
11:45 is the inauguration.
Okay. Thank you.
Where do we go here? All right, so how is our agency, or our bureau, how we manage our bureau? We've got a few different sections within the bureau. We have property management, and essentially what they do is manage all rail and aviation property, and we actually help out a little bit on the highways too. Managing leases and licenses. Anytime somebody wants to either cross over our property or say on the airports, build a hangar or something like that, we have to have an agreement, and that's what our property management folks do. Project delivery, we were talking about these bridge projects between Rutland and Hoosick, New York. We have a project delivery team that, we do bridge projects, we do crossing projects, we do runway projects, those types of things. So that's what our project delivery section does. I was mentioning earlier about the 172 bridges that we have to manage. So we have a bridge management section, and we have FRA, Federal Rail Administration. We have FRA reporting on those bridges that are due annually. So we have to have sort of a bridge management section in charge of that. Obviously, our airports, it's snowing. Right, I'm looking out the window, and it's snowing here now. So I'm sure my airport crews at the Northeast Kingdom Airport are out working on the runways right now. So that's what the airport operations section will do. Mowing, plowing, the lights, all the stuff that needs to be maintained at the airports. And then we have obviously our Amtrak contracts. So we have an Amtrak contract manager, and also at the agency, we kind of head the state nonprofit Operation Lifesaver. Operation Lifesaver is it's a safety program for railroads. We go out and do educational seminars and things at schools, truck driver training type things. What you do, first responder trainings. What happens if you get to if there was a derailment or something and fire department had to come. What does a locomotive look like, and how do you turn it off, and things like that. So there's Operation Lifesaver is a safety program, and we're heavily involved in that. So that's what our bureau looks like, and that's the staff of our bureau. So next slide, please. So there's some federal laws that we have to follow, and this affects how we run our program. Back in 2008, the federal government passed a law, PREA 209, that basically said any intercity passenger rail service under 750 miles in length has to be essentially supported by the states that they run through. So, like for instance, the Vermonter service, we share all the costs and revenue with Connecticut and Mass. So that's what that's a cost sharing. So we put in money, Connecticut puts in money, and Mass puts in money for the Vermonter. And on the Ethan Allen, we share those costs. It's Vermont and New York that share the cost for that. I was mentioning about our bridge management program. And so there's a FRA, basically Title 49, Part 237 says that if you own rail bridges, you have to have a bridge management program. And that's, I was mentioning that. So that's the 172 bridges that we have to do reporting on every year. We're mandated to know how much each bridge holds and the condition of each bridge. So we do inspections on every bridge every single year. And then the Federal Highway Administration under Section 130 basically says that we have to provide for a safe crossing condition at all the railroad highway intersection points. So this is a picture of a crossing down in Rutland City. So anyway, so we have to inspect every single, we have a railroad crossing inspector that goes out and inspects all 422 crossing locations every single year, which leads me to the next slide. So this is kind of this year's report, and we compare it obviously to last year's report. So if you remember, I said there was 422 crossing locations, but there's actually under our federal highway report, we have to show not just the locations, but if you get a crossing location that has 3 tracks crossing a road at the same time, at the same location, we have to count that a little differently. So if you actually look at the number of tracks intersecting with the highways, there's 473. And this is last year's condition report versus this year's condition report. And we're making a little bit of progress here. You can see our numbers are just slightly better this year than last year. So I'm happy to say that we have been doing crossing projects that are translating into better conditions of crossings. All right, next slide. So a little bit more about our property management section and what they do. We map all our infrastructure. So we know and railroad infrastructure is not the same width as it goes up the track. It's just not a consistent width the whole way. So we have to map as the property lines go in and out. And then, like I was saying earlier, if somebody wants to, if we have excess property or somebody needs to get from one side to the other, we have to have an agreement with that person. And that's what our property management section does. And then sometimes we find that people are using our property and either they don't know it or they don't care. So we have to do an enforcement action on that and either get them off or get them into an agreement. Sometimes there is excess property that we say, all right, we're not using it and the railroad's not using it. So if you want to use it, we'll lease it to you. On the airports, many times we'll lease the land so people can build a hangar on top of our land. So there's agreements for that. And then again, we sometimes assist the highway section when there's excess property on the highways. We might do some leases there. So this is what our property management section generally does. And next slide is the little bit more about our bridge management program and some stats about what we've got going on. So 172 bridges that we inspect on an annual basis. And this is a picture of our crew. So that's a state truck it's a snooper truck on our
Super truck, like that name, super truck, right, Jane?
Yeah. Yeah, we were around when the snooper was bought.
Yeah, we like that snooper.
Yeah, we do too. Very useful tool because it allows our team to thoroughly inspect these bridges. And as you can see, there'll be no way to look underneath that bridge and see the condition of that bridge without this piece of equipment. So,
Senator Mazen,
Yes, go right ahead.
may I ask a question on the previous slide, Dan?
Sure, go ahead.
On the previous slide, you mentioned how the state sometimes leases properties, airport land to entities to build hangars. I've heard that the Burlington International Airport, owned by the city of Burlington, a notion that has been put forward if the governance of it were to change is that the opposite would happen, which is they could retain ownership of the land and then lease to the regional authority, be it a state-run entity or a municipal entity like GMT, the land that they own, thus receiving a cash payment from the newly created entity to the city of Burlington for the use of the land. Is that a notion that you've seen in practice elsewhere, anywhere in the state, or am I making any sense in the context of my question?
yeah, so there is, as far as I know, there's no authority out there that would do that. So I'll get to the aviation stuff in a bit on another PowerPoint, but we don't own the Burlington Airport. It's actually in South Burlington, but it's owned by the city of Burlington. And then we own 10 state airports, and basically all the leases and revenues from the state airports come back to us, the state, not any authority or anything like that. So that's typically how it's done. And there is no aviation authority out there in Vermont that I know of that would work that way. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Senator Chittenden, you ought to buy that airport, and take it away from Burlington,
Just give me a price tag. What's the number? Let's start haggling.
Burlington likes that. It's a cash cow for them. They like that.
I'd love to have a longer conversation and
I know, and I know that's a good conversation to have sometime. Yes, go right ahead.
All right, so back down to the next slide. I'll finish up on bridge management just to give you an idea. We've slowly made progress on our bridge condition and our 286,000 pound capacity that I was mentioning earlier. Currently, in the next 12 months, we've got 19 bridges that are scheduled to be re-rated. So a bridge, obviously, when we load rate it, meaning we know how much it can carry, that load rating is only good for so long as, you know, steel changes condition and deteriorates on a daily basis. So anyway, so we have to re-rate bridges on a 10-year cycle, essentially. And so next year we've got 19 bridges scheduled to be re-rated. So we have 148 out of 172 currently meet the 286,000 pound capacity. And when I started doing this report, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, that number was, I don't know, it was 125 or something like that. So we are making progress. So we still have 24 bridges that do not meet the 286,000 pound capacity, but we're making progress. So I'm happy to say that, you know, what our program is doing right now, while we're not at the finish line, we are, you know, we're gaining on it. So the other factor that we look at when we inspect bridges is not just how much can it carry, but what's the condition of the bridge? Because sometimes you might say that the abutment at the end of on the bank by the river, you know, it's sitting on concrete blocks or whatever it's sitting on. So you would say that it can carry 286,000 pounds, but those blocks may be deteriorating. And so you might call that a condition that needs to be fixed, even though the weight capacity can hold it. So we do a weight load rating capacity inspection, and we do an inspection or a condition rating inspection. So that's why the next couple of things, 14% or 14 bridges, which is 8%, currently rate as a 3, and 3 is poor. Number 4, I'm sorry, 3 is serious and 4 is poor. So we've got some bridges that may hold 286, but they need some work or some bridge projects to get the infrastructure repaired. So why is that? It's mainly because these bridges are old, and you know, they're 75 to 100 years old. And a lot of the bridges, when we bought the railroads, you got to understand that the only reason we bought them was because the railroads weren't making any money and they were going under. And so when a business is not making money and going under, the last thing they do is invest in their infrastructure and repair bridges. So we got some of these bridges in pretty bad shape, and we continue to try and make upgrades. And so I think that is, I think my last slide is questions. So while we're on railroads, is there anything about the rail program that I didn't answer that you guys have questions on?
Yes, Senator Ingalls.
Director, just to expand on the last question a little bit, do you have a projected model of what what your increase is going to be as far as what rail's doing in the state?
Increases in
as far as in use,
traffic?
as far as increases, as far as to get more of these trucks off the road to combat, as Senator Kitchell had said, the climate change and wear and tear.
So we have currently we're in the process of finishing what our statewide rail plan is. And that's a long-term planning document that projects where railroads and freight and intercity passenger, where all that stuff goes. So we're in the process of finishing that document. Should be done sometime this spring. But the short answer, without that document in front of me and the numbers, is that railroad freight is increasing in the state of Vermont. The railroad business is seeing a lot more. So the reason is that there's a couple of reasons. One is shipping by rail is very efficient. You can put a lot of freight, a lot of stuff on a train, and it can go a long way. And the cost for that is a lot more economical than shipping a bunch of trucks back to back to back. So, and I think the other thing is railroads are good for and it's good to ship stuff for the environment, because the amount of fuel it takes to move a ton of freight on a railroad is much less than to move a ton of freight on a truck. So people are recognizing that, and they're seeing that that's a good green way to move freight. And I think that's sort of helping with the, I think a lot of people are going to rail. Plus, I think that, all these things that we have done within the state has increased the efficiency, and it's made it a lot more reliable mode of transportation for a lot of these shippers, where before, you might not get the freight there and it might take days. Now, because we've fixed up rail, we've fixed up bridges, we're moving freight a lot more reliably now than we ever have in the state of Vermont in recent history. I mean,
One of the companies I was involved with earlier in my career, we had the ability to bring in freight on rail or truck, which we owned our own trucks. And it was really preferred by us to bring it in by rail, because one rail car equaled five truckloads.
Yeah.
And the way that we were able to offload it, it didn't really take that much longer to unload that rail car than it did a truck, because we could handle the capacity of it. So it was even cheaper, electricity costs, and all of that, and person hour costs to unload that freight from the rail car. So I'm a huge proponent of rail and would love to see us expand the program.
yeah, great. Thanks for recognizing
Yes,
that. I agree.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Dan, did those stats on that last slide of the bridges, do those include the bridges that aren't being used?
Yes, so they do.
Mean you take them out, or do you still have to like report on them, and even if they're not?
So in this statistic right here, like for instance, Bridge 305 and 306, which I think you're referring to, which we're sort of bypassing right now, those are still included in the active rail 172 bridges. So because those effectively have not been taken out of the FRA database yet as active. So the answer to that is we still have to show them as active. And yes, they do not meet the 286,000 pound capacity.
Okay. And even though I know Senator Moss and Kitchell want to hear a discussion about the Montpelier.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I was waiting. I didn't even want to bring it up.
Yeah, for
because
$100 million, we can get some passengers from Montpelier to Barrie.
maybe we could just buy everybody a Tesla, Senator Perchlik.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I will spare that discussion. But I do want to talk to you, Dan, about some issues with the railroad right in Montpelier. We had talked before this session by email, but I just want to flag that if you and I could talk on phone sometime,
Sure.
It would be great.
Okay, any other questions from Dan?
So Senator Perchlik, if you send me some potential times that work for you, I'll jump on the phone with you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
right,
if not, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we're going to get back. And I'd like to break a little earlier today because the inauguration, anybody wants to see it, it's going to be on at 11:45. So let's take a 10-minute break and get back on our next subject. Okay?
Everybody mute, please, and stop their videos for the break for 10 minutes.
You gonna fly down for the inauguration, Senator Mazza?
Okay, yep.
Think you'll make
Oh,
it. Just
Um,
Like to see it.
so Senator Mazza,
Yes.
I'm glad we're having a break. As some very, very ancient history, I actually attended the inauguration of President Kennedy.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Wow.
Ralph Flanders,
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
who was a U.S. Senator at the time, was a close family friend. And so I was there for what I
Oh,
viewed as a pretty,
that was nice. That was quite an honor.
yeah, I was quite a bit younger, let me tell you, but yeah, it was wonderful opportunity to have. And I remember Robert Frost, I mean, he was there but the heater caught on fire. But other
Wow.
than that, it was really great.
Well,
And so
that's
I'm
great.
waiting for somebody to say they weren't even born then, because that's often what I
Well,
hear.
that's a good memory to have, though, the being there. Wow. That's
Uh-huh.
great. That's a great memory.
Yeah. hmm
Oh, yeah. I hope it goes smooth today. That's all I hope for.
Well, I hope so. And it was so cold, but the crowds were so big, and it was so obviously was so much enthusiasm and kind of a whole new, well, the whole vitality that came in with him and
Well, Trump must
his
have left by
family.
now. He was supposed to leave this morning, so he must be out of there by now. So,
Pardon me?
Trump must have gone by now this morning. He was going to leave early.
I know you had a band and a 21 gun salute.
You're
Yeah.
all on YouTube Live, just so you
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's get back to business and get the next agenda. What's the next agenda? Dan, you got something else for us, or?
Yes, you got me again.
Okay, we're lucky. Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah.
So Liz, if you could start the aviation PowerPoint for me, that would be great. And I'll try to be quick here, keep you guys on schedule. So, all right. So aviation in the state of Vermont. So let's go directly to slide 2. We'll talk about what we've got for public use airports in the state of Vermont. So if you look at the green ones, that's what the state of Vermont Agency of Transportation controls. So there's 10 state-owned airports: Franklin County, Northeast Kingdom, the John Boylan Airport over at Island Pond, Caledonia Airport, Morrisville Stowe, Edward F. Knapp in Berlin, Middlebury, Rutland, Hartness down in Springfield, and then William H. Morris down in Bennington. So that's what my bureau, our VTrans bureau, controls and maintains on a daily basis. We talked about this a little bit. There's one municipally owned airport in the state of Vermont, which is, again, it's in South Burlington, but owned by the city of Burlington. And then there's 5 other airports in the state that are privately owned, but they're considered public use airports, meaning people can fly in and out of there. We don't fund those. We don't maintain those. FAA doesn't fund them, but they're considered public use airports. All right, next slide. So what do we do? What do we have on these airports? So this is, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So this is just kind of a picture of some of the things that we have and have to maintain on a daily basis. Fuel farms, obviously, airports and airplanes need fuel and can't just run down to the local gas station and to get fuel. So we have to have sort of our own gas stations on the airports. And most of our airports have both Jet A and what's called avgas, which is essentially 100 low lead fuel. We have weather stations, which are the AWOS. Those are weather stations that we have to maintain. Some are owned by the state of Vermont. Some are owned by the FAA. We have a combination of both around the state. We have some hazard beacons off our airport that we have to maintain. Sometimes we have a whole bunch of power lines going up to the top of a mountain for a hazard beacon. We have to maintain that. we've got a bunch of equipment. So we've got, mowers and blowers. We have in Rutland, because we have scheduled passenger service in Rutland, we actually have to maintain our own fire truck. And that's what the ARF truck is, you see in the picture. Sweepers, because we can't use salt on any of our airports, we actually have to try to get the moisture off the runways as quick as possible. So sweeping our runways is oftentimes a good way to get the snow, and before it freezes to the runway, we sweep it right off real quick, and it doesn't allow it to melt and create an ice layer. So
When you say Rutland has a firefighter, they have to staff that every day? I mean, all the time?
no, so we don't. So essentially what we do is we have a contract with the city of Rutland.
Okay.
And if if a pilot calls in, says I'm inbound and I've got problems or whatever,
Oh, they send people out. Okay.
they'll send people to the airport.
Yep.
But we need to have, so the ARF truck that's there carries a special foam.
Yeah.
Which is not a standard foam for normal, first responders. So we have to have special equipment for that. And then we got a bunch of buildings. We've got terminals, we've got state-owned hangars, we've got snow removal equipment buildings that hold all our equipment. So we maintain all of that infrastructure. So this is just a picture of what we have. And the next slide kind of gives you a breakdown in quantity. If we can go to the next slide, it'll actually give you an idea of what that means in actual numbers. And so we have 14 runways and 26 taxiways if you count all 10 airports. And what that equates to is 65 runway lane miles. And that's a lot of asphalt to maintain. And a lane mile is essentially 1 mile long, 12 feet wide. So think about that in as far as what we maintain. It's quite a bit of surface area. 85 taxiway lane miles, 270 runway protection zone areas. And what that means is at the end of each runway, the asphalt might end, but there's actually a safety area at the end of each runway that has to be maintained, flat and mowed down and safe. So I mentioned hazard beacons. There's 32 of those, which has 14 miles of power line that we have to maintain to get to each one of those. As far as aircraft and vehicle parking, there's 1.7 million square feet of asphalt apron area that we maintain outside of the runway I was just talking about. So that's a lot of surface area as well. And we can hold about 306 aircraft tie downs in that space that we maintain as well. So 206,000 square feet of parking lot basically at the terminals. Talking about the fuel a little bit, we have the capacity to store 126,000 gallons of fuel and an additional 4,700 gallons of equipment fuel, so diesel and that type of stuff for our equipment. We've got about 45 miles of fencing that, if you add it all up, that we maintain annually. That's a lot of fence, a lot of gates, and we do a lot of work on fencing and gates. Gates tend to break down. Trees fall on fences, things like that. So that seems to be a lot of work for us. A little bit more about the buildings. We got 9 terminals. We got 6 maintenance hangars, 12 storage hangars, some weather systems I was talking about. So one ARF building, which is the fire equipment building, and then a bunch of snow removal equipment buildings. So on a daily basis, that's kind of what we work with every day. Next slide, we'll talk about the federal funding source that we have. So airports, because we're in what's called the NIPIAS, well, basically we're in the national airport system, and meaning that you can fly from anywhere in the country into one of our public use airports. The Federal Aviation Administration gives us a little bit of money per year to be in the NIPIAS, and essentially there's 9 airports that qualify. The only one that doesn't is Island Pond, because that's essentially just a grass strip. Even though it's a public use airport, it doesn't qualify to be in the NIPIAS. So we get $150,000 per year for 9 airports, and then we get another 560,000 in a different bucket of money for just safety money for state apportionment. So that's essentially what we get. We get $1.35 million annually from FAA. So we also generate some money from leasing out property. So there's 145 privately owned hangars that we have leases on that we get annual rent from. There's 12 hangars that are built that we lease out at a different rate than just the land under the privately owned hangars. So we get a little bit higher rate for that. And then there's a few businesses. There's 32 different businesses around the state on our airports, and each one of those has a commercial rate that we generate income from. All right, so next I want to talk about sort of a new side of our program, which is our UAS, or a lot of people know it as the drone program. Started this a couple of years ago, and we've got, we have in our bureau, we have certified pilots, and you have to pass a test and go through a whole bunch of training, become a certified pilot, to be a certified pilot and pass a test with the FAA. So we have 6 pilots. We have 6 visual observers. You can't fly a mission by yourself. You actually need, the pilot has to be in control of the actual UAS itself, while the observer is watching everything going on around it to make sure that nothing interferes with the drone itself. So currently we have stationed different drones around the state so that we can respond quickly if we need to. So we've got drones in Lyndonville, Montpelier, and Rutland. So in the past year, we flew 14 training missions. That's down a little bit because of COVID. We didn't do a lot of our training that we would normally do. That number, I expect in the next year, our training missions will be up quite a bit. And then we flew 30 mission specifics. So we, even though we're in the Agency of Transportation, our drone program supports other sister agencies as well as other divisions within VTrans. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. If we go to the next slide. So there was a highway project. This was in Colchester. Obviously, they wanted to look at traffic patterns and see what traffic was doing. So we, we scheduled a mission there to observe traffic for a bit. So our team was involved with the project team on the highway side, and worked on different videos and different angles to see things they needed to see for traffic patterns as they designed that project. So our capacity, basically, I was saying we got 6 pilots, and we need 2 per mission. So I mean, we could be flying 3 different missions kind of at the same time around the state if we had to. And how that works is on the VTrans website. You go to the VTrans website, click on aviation, and then you'll see right on the page there's a request form for either VTrans, other divisions, or other sister agencies if they want our help. Fill out the flight request, and then we schedule that in. So, all right, next slide. This is a slide of a project that we needed to do within the aviation section, and this is down at our Bennington Airport, and we had trees that were protruding into our flight surface there as we approached the runway. And so we needed to do a mapping. We actually mapped this, and we actually can figure out the elevation of the land, the elevation of the height of the highest tree. And basically there was 17 acres of property here that we had to cut the trees on to get on the approach surface. So this is just an example of how we use our UAS program within our own section. And then the last slide is a picture of how a mission we did for a sister agency. This is a building in Waterbury, and a little over a year ago, we flew this mission. They needed to inspect the very expensive slate roof And you can see that this is pretty steep. So BGS called us and said, and this is a view kind of all the way out. But what we actually did, and this is for presentation purposes, really, but what we really did was we got real close and we could look at individual slate tiles on the roof and see, you know, if they're broken or if they're loose or things like that. And we didn't have to, you know, put a man up on the roof and, you know, put them in an unsafe condition. And it was actually much quicker and much more efficient to do it this way. So this is just a really good example of what our UAS team can do. We also supplement Vermont State Police if there was, say, a rescue mission or things like that. We're sort of they have a UAS. Vermont State Police has one, but oftentimes we supplement their program, and you know, so they call us a lot. We're in direct communication, and other agencies around, like for instance, the Ag Department and other, they have UAS capability, but we are in the aviation section. We are considered sort of the aviation authority in the state of Vermont. So a lot of what they do follows rules and protocols that we created in our aviation program, so that all Vermont state agencies are kind of doing the same thing, following the same rules. And they call us a lot for guidance. So, and I think the drone program is going to expand because there's so many uses that we didn't even think of when we started this program that we get called on. So anyway, this is going to be, this is a growing program. So, and I think that's all I have for, oh, just to mention a little bit more about the Rutland service. So Boston, we have Cape Air. It's an essential air service out of Rutland to Boston, 3 sort of round trips per day that come in and out of Rutland. And this is a picture of the Cessna. That this is their old plane. They're phasing this plane out, and there's going to be a new plane coming in called the Technam, and it's a little bit better, bigger aircraft. Still only holds 9 passengers total, but in this particular plane, this particular photo, the actual co-pilot seat is actually the 9th passenger seat, which is kind of crammed in. The new Technam, there's a pilot, co-pilot plus 9 passengers. So the new plane's a little bit better, a little bit bigger. So anyway, I promised I'd be brief in aviation. So that is what I have. Is there any questions about what we're doing in aviation?
Do any of our airports maintain their finances without a lot of subsidy, or some do better than others?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. That there's no mode of transportation that you know, pays for itself, unfortunately. But yeah, there's certain airports that do generate more revenue than others. Certainly, Rutland is as far as state-owned airports go, Rutland is our busiest airport and generates the most income. So I would say Rutland would be our #1 generating airport, although it does not 100% sustain itself financially.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
How many of the state airports have passenger service?
So the only scheduled service we have is in Rutland. However, like the Northeast Kingdom Airport and Morrisville Stowe, there's charter services that come in and out of there a lot. And also Montpelier. So I would say we have charter services, you know, weekly at least, especially in Morrisville Stowe. Morrisville Stowe, in the wintertime during ski season, they have regular Thursday, Friday, Sunday charters that you can get down from New York, essentially just outside of New York City, to Morrisville Stowe. You know, that's a weekly, it's not really scheduled, but it's chartered, meaning, you know, it's sort of, they do it so much that, you know, it's almost like a scheduled service, but it's not.
And on the 17 acres that you had to maintain to ensure safe entrance and exit of the airport, is that a leased property that you would actually have to lease the rights to maintain that property? Is it owned by the state, or is that an agreement made with a landowner?
So, yeah, Senator Ingalls, we have all kinds of different scenarios here. So the particular photo I showed you, believe it or not, that particular piece of land is owned by Fish and Wildlife. And we actually had to get an agreement with Fish and Wildlife to go in and cut those trees. But say, for instance, the other end of the airport, we might be dealing with 6 or 10 different private landowners that we would have to go in and do this, because the approach surface is what it is. The FAA determines this is your approach surface, and then we have to go out and get rights to that property. And in many cases, we have, long-term permanent easements, but in some cases we don't. So we've got, like I said, we have a little bit of everything. But this happens at every airport. The flight pattern, the navigation easements coming in and out of the airport, we're constantly maintaining those surfaces because trees grow every year. We have to do this on a continual basis.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Chittenden.
So thank you for this presentation. And if, as long as the voters allow me to continue to serve in this role over the next however many years, one question I'm going to keep having is, how much are we assessing strategically the impact of automated drive vehicles and that impact on airways? The articles I've seen start to predict a drop in short distance air travel because the convenience that these self-driving cars are predicted to have in the next 5 to 10 year horizon. I'd be interested to, in the years to come, really understand the traffic that's being used on these state-owned airports. So that we can better understand if there's going to be a shift in the transportation demand that some of these industry experts are forecasting with the advent of self-driving automobiles.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And I don't know that I know the answer to that right now, but I mean, I think that's an interesting projection. There's also which is something that's coming, but sort of the self-driving or drone type airplane and things like that. So that technology is progressing pretty quickly, and there's actually electric airplanes and things like that are happening. So I think you're going to see that kind of a technology not just in the on the highways, but you're going to see it at airports as well.
I've always felt that the state-owned airports, the community ought to be involved more in supporting them because it is beneficial to the community. Like the Stowe Airport is it's an economic driver for that area, and I think the communities don't put enough emphasis on those airports, and I always felt they should play a bigger role because it is beneficial to them, and yet they don't have a lot of financial involvement in them. But that's only my opinion over the years.
Yeah, and I mean, I think history will show that a lot of these airports were municipally owned, and then the state acquired them because they were struggling in the local communities. But yeah, they're great assets. These airports they're great assets. I think they serve a great role in the transportation sort of network that we manage. So anyway,
all right.
That's all I have.
Okay.
I had one question.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Pritchard.
Dan, are you working at all with Beta Technologies? And Chair, I think it would be great to have them in again. I thought it was a great presentation they gave last year or the year before, maybe.
Yeah, we were
about them not being able to do their practice flights in Vermont. They had to go over to the Plattsburgh airport.
Right. I was going to mention that. We were working with them pretty heavily when they were trying to use some of our airports for their practice. Since they haven't been able to do that, we haven't had a lot of communication with them. But I don't think it's over. I think that as their technology develops and they get sort of to the next step, they're going to want to do some stuff on our property, but they're just not there yet.
I mean, it was a federal decision about not using our.
Yeah, it had to do with airspace and liftoff, and yeah, it was not anything we did. It was a restriction from the FAA.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Dan, very much.
Thank you very much. Great
Thank you.
to see you guys again.
Thank you, Dan. Good to see you, Dan.
Next is Ross McDonald.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
So Liz, am I able to share the screen?
Good question. Let me do that for you right now.
Thank you.
You're set.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, nice to see everyone again. Nice to meet you virtually, Senator Ingalls, to see you again, Senator Chittenden. We'll do a very broad overview of the program today and speak about some of the pilot programs and elements that are revolving around the public transit program. So, bear with me. There we go. The vision of public transit in Vermont is to meet the basic mobility needs for those who are transit dependent, provide access to employment and other modes, mitigate congestion, preserve air quality, and advance the state's economic development objectives, all in a safe, reliable, cost-effective, and environmentally responsible manner. And we're able to go along that path with a pretty unique way of funding the program in rural areas. Our budget is about $36 million annually, depending on certain competitive awards that we get or we don't get. That can fluctuate. But the majority of those funds come from state funds and the flexed over funds from FHWA. And so our bridges and road programs will flex upwards to 18 or $19 million into the public transit budget. And in many rural states, you get your formula funds from FTA. They put in a little bit of state money, and that's their program. And they rely on CAP agencies and church groups and the like for essential mobility. And in Vermont, we get those formula funds, around $8 million a year, and we match those with about $8 million in state funds, which allows us to match competitive awards and those federal funds. And we also use that to match a lot of the flex funds that we receive. About 20% of our regional budgets do derive from local funds, and many times that's discussed at town meetings to support the local public transit service. Types of routes that we operate in Vermont are the fixed routes that most folks are familiar with ADA paratransit service for those who are not able to access the bus as per usual. We deviate some of our fixed routes to be able to pick up passengers off the scheduled route. We also have two demand response elements, which is the Vermont Elders and Persons with Disability program, as well as the Medicaid program. In the state of Vermont, we have these braided services to ensure that we're maximizing our investments in transportation, whether that's staff, overheads, computers, those types of things. We also support intercity service that allows us to access the broad network, getting you anywhere in the country, as well as a transportation demand management program called Go Vermont. And that really is just trying to be a one-click, one-call resource for people who are trying to get around as best they can. Some additional services, when they don't negatively affect those services that we just talked about, could include Meals on Wheels, charter services, emergency response. Those entities are part of our own statewide emergency response plans, as that represents a lot of infrastructure and capacity to get folks moving around in the event of emergency.
Hey, Ross.
Yes.
Ross,
We can't see your presentation if that's
Oh.
what you is happening.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm looking at it because it's on the website, but for other slides, you probably want to make sure we can see it.
Okay. Can you see it now?
No,
No.
I'll share it. If that would help.
Sure.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
let me see.
oh wait, it looks like it's working.
uh-huh.
Great. Okay. If you can see it now, then I think we're all set.
Yep.
Okay. So throughout the state, and thank you for that, throughout the state, we have 7 regional transit providers with over 600 employees, and all of the municipalities are served with either fixed route or that demand response type service. And we were hovering right around 16,000 trips per day pre-COVID. The budget that I just reviewed really allows for some investments and innovations that wouldn't be possible without the current support that we receive from this administration and the legislature. We'll be looking at the trip planner and some other pilots that really has allowed us to be a leader throughout the country in rural transit. But let's start with ridership. And by fiscal year, we're just over 5 million in 2015. There was a strike in our urban area, and it took a while to get back over to that 5 million mark. We were due to achieve that this year, but then when COVID hit, we can start seeing the effects. And when we look at month-to-month data and the reductions as a result of the emergency period, we lost about 1 million trips due to the COVID pandemic. Some elements we'll talk about today would be the COVID impact. Certainly everybody's concerned about the services and the cost implications. Our new TDM grant program, which is a Mobility Transportation Innovation grant program. Microtransit pilot, which is now in its 4th week, just starting in the Montpelier area. We do have an update on our electric transit vehicles and an update on our demand response pilots as well. So when we look at ridership, it really did fall off the shelf. 70 to 80% reduction in ridership, and it was about the same with our demand response services. We then moved a lot of those capacities to deliver meals and medical needs and supplies around the communities. Some people worked with their school districts to get nutrition out to those families that needed that when schools were closed. It really showed the value and capacity of our services in the event of an emergency. We were just up to about 60% before this new wave of increased infection rates, and we're down to about that 50% under usual expected ridership. The cost per month have been due to lack of fares. We're not collecting fares to limit contact, the increased hours to clean, the increased costs for PPE, the disinfecting process. Through this pandemic, we have been disinfecting the vehicles multiple times per day. We have put barriers in place to ensure social distancing and to limit contamination on the bus. We have a 50% capacity on our rural system buses and about 75% capacity limitations on our urban buses. Face masks are required, which really helped that statewide announcement and helped prevent our bus drivers from being enforcers of the statewide policy. We have posters and ongoing communications as people get on and off the bus. I mentioned the lack of enforcement of our fare policies, and we're using UV wands and air purifiers. Where we can, we're boarding at the rear of the bus. As a result, I'm happy to report that we've had a few instances with some operators coming down with the virus. Those have all been identified as community spread and not associated with the workplace. Seems to be the risk mitigation measures in place have been effective in protecting both the operator as well as the general public. Moving on, the Transportation Demand Management Grant Program was passed in the summer during the emergency session. And we had about 6 weeks to put it out on the street. And through Dan Courier, our Go Vermont program manager, we were able to get these announcements and notice of funding opportunity out. We received 16 proposals requesting over $900,000, and we're able to work with those proposers to meet that 500K limit with 12 of those projects. The whole idea is for this TDM program to incentivize strategies to improve both the mobility and access for transit-dependent Vermonters, reduce the use of single occupancy vehicles, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our partners that have been awarded funds really range from municipalities to CAP agencies, some RPC work, some environmental groups. All of those people have come to us in the past looking to partner with us through Go Vermont, primarily trying to find ways to offer a more efficient range of options and opportunities for those people who need to get around without their single occupancy vehicles. So we're up and running. We have an overview online that anyone can go to. I'm hoping to be back in the future in the next couple months where we can provide an overview of all of these projects and offer a status of all of those activities that are currently just getting underway. On-demand microtransit is not a new concept, but it is new in Vermont, and it is fairly new in rural, less dense areas. But a real-time hailed, dynamically routed public transit service within a designated region, really the Lyft and Uber type of approach where people call up their services when needed to go as close as possible to their origin, to get them as close as possible to their destination. And it's just instructive. And this is similar to what we've done in Vermont, in Montpelier, which is rather than having 2 routes and a shuttle service during the legislative session, we've combined, or we've kind of rasterized or outlined a region, and that anybody in that area can dial up and receive those trips. We're hoping that that would be more useful to more people for more reasons than the current routes, which are circulator type routes, or the route that goes from Montpelier into the central Vermont health facility or hospital, that it would be able to just be more responsive than it had been. So we were looking at this because in Montpelier alone, we were spending about $700,000 plus on those 2 routes, the Montpelier-Barre Hospital Hill route, the Montpelier Circulator, and the shuttle during the legislative session. We also had a lot of demand response services in that same 7.5 mile square region. So not only did we have 3 buses actively moving people or not around these scheduled services, but we also had 1 or 2 vehicles picking up and dropping off for demand response. We're wondering, is there a way to combine all this, put everybody on the same system, and make it more worthwhile? We see the current ridership is stagnated. Current cost per trip continues to increase. Could this service be more flexible, more convenient? And based on the case studies that we developed through the Montpelier Microtransit Working Group, we thought that the risks were low enough to pilot this and replace those services with a true microtransit service. After 4 weeks, I can report that there are over 270 people who have signed up. They are doing about 50 trips per day, and that overall there have been some fits and starts, some individuals where change is just really hard. Sustainable Montpelier Coalition is our partner, helping us with the outreach plan, providing a comfort and credibility for this new service. And they're also working directly with people and bringing them through the process to access this microtransit service. But so far, GMT seems pleased. The public who have rated the service are averaging 4.5 out of 5 stars. And we have some people writing that. Dan Courier lives in Montpelier. He's one of our staff members. He's been using it regularly, and he's been his feedback has been this is a far improvement over the circulator and the other services, which were deviated fixed routes, which meant you may be at your bus stop on time, but if that bus had been deviated, you could be 5, 10, 15 minutes waiting, wondering where the bus is. This allows you to track the bus as it comes. We have a call center for those who don't have smartphones, and GMT is looking into putting phones up and at certain locations for people who don't have the abilities to give us a call and to schedule those.
How's it working, Senator Perchlik?
Yeah, I'm on a little advisory committee for it, and it's been working great. The mayor also, I think the mayor is taking it, Montpelier mayor is taking it every day. She has good reports, and I agree with Ross's interpretation there that there's been a couple people that are kind of mad about a couple little things, but overall people seem psyched about the opportunity. And one thing I'd point out, or Ross, you can mention that you've had a picture of a minivan, and then on this slide you have that kind of larger van, but right now the service is still using the cutaway buses, right? Like these vans are maybe a future iteration.
They are, and the cutaways that are being used are not that much larger than the van. We do expect to have 2 electric cutaways coming on online that will be used for this service. And GMT has ordered quite a few vans for a few reasons. One, to right size and to provide a comfortable trip for those services that aren't so high in demand or require that many passengers. Also, we have a paucity of CDL drivers throughout the state, and we're seeing more of our providers looking to add more Sprinter type vehicles like you see here, because there's no CDL requirement, but it can allow you to hire and train somebody to become a CDL. So you'll start seeing a little bit more of those in the mix as we talk about fleet management and percentages. Next item was started about 4 or 5 years ago. We were going to go out on the street for a trip planner that would show a multimodal approach to transportation options throughout the state. We could partner with a private company and have them develop that for us, or we could go into the open source community, build the data, and then be responsible for that data, maintain that data, and then work with the providers who are able to respond to those needs. What that has allowed us to do was expand the GTFS general transit feed specifications to GTFS Flex. It allows us to just expand some of the parameters so that you see more options in rural areas. You can see a better location association with bus stops, ADA service areas, flag stop areas. All of those things that Google Maps was not capturing is now being captured and revealed in our Go Vermont trip planner. I'm happy to say that Google is now beta testing the GTFS Flex specs. So we are soon to see a better response and reveal once people continue to use the Google trip planner. And we've also been able to use that data and launch the statewide app, or the transit app, which every route at every bus stop is captured, and you'll see in real time the projected, the real-time location and the projected stop and starts throughout all of our routes throughout all of the states. So we have about 115, 118 routes, seasonal adjustments and all those things notwithstanding. And anyone who's riding on any of those buses can see where their bus is and when they're going to be getting to their destination. That really is available throughout most urban regions. It's the first thing you need to address, which is that anxiety sitting at the bus stop. Did I miss it? Is it coming? Is it late? we now have that at our fingertips, and that's been a successful launch. We continue to maintain that data and make those updates as we make service changes. Moving on to the electric bus efforts, we've been fortunate when we see the path to full electrification. It's the long path at this point to full electrification. We've been successful in the last 4 years with our low and no emissions competitive grant program. We've also received 2 vehicles from the VW settlement funds. What we've been able to show is this partnership between our public transit providers, VTrans, VEIC, who is helping us with specifications, grant writing, and the case study assessment so that we can learn from these pilot projects, as well as the regional utility. So all 4 of those entities are working on and submitting these grants together, and we've received a lot of assistance from BED, Green Mountain Power, Lindenville, Lighting. All of those folks have come to the table and helped us with infrastructure, offset the local non-federal match requirement, and have been very good at helping us show the way forward in rural areas who are looking to incorporate e-buses.
What's the range on that, Ross? Can they go all day long, or they have to stop for charging?
Well, it depends on the route, Senator Mazza. Right now, we're seeing ranges from 100 to 200 miles. We have a lot of classifications to test. You can see here the larger Proterra buses. Those are 2 buses that are on the system and the urban system right now. The range hasn't been an issue, but other issues have arisen that have not allowed us to use these at the levels that we had anticipated. So this is why with those 14 vehicles that are either just arriving or due to arrive soon, we're really trying to be pragmatic and to test the cutaways, the medium duty buses, or what we call the Gillig type vehicles, as well as these MCI or larger vehicles. But the jury's still out on the range, on the effectiveness, and can we replace on a very large scale our diesel and gas engines with electric vehicles without threatening the operational expectations that we've built. So we're just getting started with that type of assessment.
Some windshield on that thing. Oh my God.
That's one thing that hasn't gone wrong, Senator Mazza. But
wow.
But those doors, those electric doors, have really kept us from using the vehicle as much as we'd like. And this is an industry-wide issue. I've spoken with folks around the country, and these Proterras have had electrical issues as they try to, build these from the ground up. So we'll continue to work through these pilots. But what we this week we're putting out on the street an electrification plan scope of work, and we expect to collect the data, the feedback from these 14, and then the future EVs that we'll be receiving through additional low and no emission grant awards, that we want to certainly look at the performance to date, those vehicle costs as they relate to upfront initial costs between the gas and diesel versus the electric, as well as those operational efficiencies. How will these, at the end of its life cycle, be cheaper because we're not doing lube oil filters, because they don't require the maintenance that our other vehicles do? The jury's out on that, but these funding scenarios need to be shown in a way that allows us to move forward with an electrification plan with the risks and the costs all outlined in a living document that can be adjusted as we gather the metrics and the data from these pilots.
Senator Mazza. Senator Mazza.
Yes, go ahead.
So Ross, good to see you. I remember hearing that at times when these were first being floated, there was a possibility that the range and performance was going to vary based on the cold weather. Is that bearing out at all? Are we seeing a lower range during the colder months because of battery power retention?
In my discussions with John Moore, the general manager at GMT, there haven't been range issues, and those range, whether it's been cold or warm, those vehicles have been able to perform through the day. We haven't had those 20 below days yet to test. We can expect a range give back through the as it gets colder. But again, so far so good. One of the big elements on these vehicles is the heating systems, and that even though it's an electric bus, the heating system is powered by a diesel heater, because that would just draw down so much of that battery. And so some of these half measures are being incorporated to bridge that gap, whether it's a range or operational efficiency.
Thank you.
So we'll be able to share the results with our electric vehicles next year. We'll have several on the road. And right now, five of the 7 providers have EVs or are due to get them. It could be 7 out of 7 by the end of this fiscal year. So just the last 2 items, I wanted to give you an update on some demand response pilots. Wherever we go throughout the state, we're told we need more service. We need Uber. We need more mobility options. And we believe that, but we don't know to what extent. So we'll do some of these pilots like this Rides to Wellness. This is setting up trips to and from health providers for people who are not eligible for Medicaid or elderly and disabled trips. And we thought there might be a big gap there in terms of getting those other potential clients to and from essential healthcare services. And what we found was that while it has been used, we keep expanding the partners for this pilot because we're just not seeing that level of demand that was anticipated. That's very helpful as we plan, to build capacity and mobility options around the state. Conversely, the demand response pilot called the Recovery and Job Access Rides has proven to be much more in demand, and particularly in our St. Johnsbury Northeast Kingdom area, where we have a few facilities for those in recovery. But we received $320,000 over 2 years. It requires a 20% match, and we have an MOU with the Agency of Human Services to split that local match between AHS and VTrans. This is a true partnership. So many of our clients are the same, and it also allows us to learn together. But those services began in 2019 in the rural region. Second pilot just started a year ago in the Rutland area. And we saw over 2,000 trips between September 2019 through April 2020. And what we saw was that in Rutland, we didn't see a lot of demand. However, we're trying to figure out, is that because the services are within a dense area? Do they have enough transit service to get people to and from these treatments and counseling sessions and everything that is associated with those efforts to stay in recovery? It's incredible and onerous. But this is something where, as I sit on the intervention, recovery, and treatment and recovery committee, has gone over very well. Most locations would like to see this expanded. It may be something that we come to this committee with next year as its own line item as we continue to continue our efforts to address the addiction and opioid crisis in the state. But that's a broad overview. I hope I didn't go over time, and hope to be back in front of the committee to talk about any of these items that you deem interesting.
Any other questions from Ross? Well, I'm sure we'll have others as time goes on, but that's a good overview, and it's always an interesting discussion about public transit, and it'll be ongoing for a long time. So we'll get back to you if we have anything else. At this point, I think we're all set. Everybody, any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Ross. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Life and it has led him right here to the doorstep of history. The inaugural ceremony is about the horns.
Waiting for Joe.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
And the first
Yeah. Should I just go ahead?
Somebody's talking in the background.
All right. Ready to go?
Yeah, I just need to share my screen, Liz.
Okay.
While she's doing that, I'll just say good morning, everybody. I'm Joe Segali. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Research. I'm going to give you an overview of the Bureau.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
let's listen in
All
right
set.
now.
Okay. So just let me know when you can see my presentation.
Yep. you can see it.
Okay. Ready to go.
Okay, great. So I think I heard the senator allude to earlier when Michelle introduced everybody, you know, there's actually a lot of sections, and my section or my bureau might actually be called Policy Planning, Research, Mapping, and Permitting, because those are the various components of the bureau that I manage. So we have a research section, a policy and planning section, which is really, even that has three components of it. The environmental section, our policy and planning, and then also our relationships with the regional planning commissions, permitting services, which is Act 250, and also our permits to work in the highway right of way, and then mapping. And there's there's 26 people that are in the bureau. We have one position that's a job share between parents with a couple of kids, and that's been working out really well for them. And we get to keep a couple of excellent employees as they're raising their kids. So I'm going to go in and talk about each one of these sections, starting with the Transportation Planning Initiative, which is the program where the agency provides funding to 10 regional planning commissions. And we also pass through funding to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, which is a little bit different than the others. It's actually a federally designated metropolitan planning organization, and it gets formula federal planning funds that pass through the agency and to Chittenden County. So we coordinate with all of the regional planning commissions. The TPI has been in existence now for at least 25 years. And these are the graphic on the left shows the performance measures that we track with the regional planning commission, starting with enhancing and cooperating coordination between the agency and regional planning commissions and municipalities. You can see there's 244 municipalities that are actively engaged with the RPCs in transportation planning. And the municipalities do that by participating in the transportation advisory committees. And you can see there were 80 of those meetings over the last year. And those meetings are really important outreach avenues for us, because we can go to them in a really efficient way and present different issues and get feedback. They also, the TACs also provide input every year into our project prioritization process. And so that's our direct connection back to the locals. You can see that there were 90 non-municipal representatives actively engaged. So that's people that represent maybe transit or bike and ped issues, or people from the disabled communities, and so on. So again, it's a way for us to engage at the local level. 60 coordination activities with the work that we do, and about half of their budgets go into supporting municipal technical assistance and providing data collection for us. It's a pretty big number, 600 data collection activities, things like traffic counts and park and ride counts and bike and ped counts and so on. And that all feeds up into our planning process. So when I come back and talk about the budget, you'll see that half of the policy and planning budget actually goes to the regional planning commissions and is supporting the work at the local level. So moving on to policy and planning in general, We do legislative studies. For example, we'll be talking about the direct-to-consumer automobile sales study this year, as well as truck permitting issues. We manage the federal grant applications and have been quite successful over the years, particularly in rail. We have the Better Connections grant program, and the picture down on the right is from the grant that went to Danville. I picked that for obvious reasons. And that was a study that looked at, or a plan that looked at, how to better connect the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail and the villages in Danville together. And I thought that was a great example of, we provided the funding, but it was just a great way to get the word out about this plan that was going on. I don't know what the parade was, but I thought it was just great to see.
Is Jane on that parade, or is she on the wagon there?
No, I'm not on the wagon.
Okay, all right.
What is you remember what the purpose of the parade is? I'm just curious.
It was just in the absence of other annual events to give visibility. So that was the purpose. We have a small group, and one of the victims of COVID, of course, has been a lot of our community events. So there's been an effort to try to do some smaller substitutions.
Yes. So we've done these Better Connection grants now for since 2015 or so, and there's been 15 or so around the state, and we did an evaluation of the program, and it's been successful. We get lots of people engaged, and they've led to implementation of specific items. So automated vehicle testing and coordination is something that we're managing out of my bureau, and I'm involved with that personally. Our corridor management planning process, I think I talked about that when I was talking about the strategic planning work that we do. Right now we have bicycle and pedestrian strategic plan underway, rail, freight, and aviation plans are underway. So we do the planning for all of the modes. We do flood resilience planning. We do coordination with national organizations such as the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, and try to put forth the agency's positions that eventually kind of make their way up to the federal level. And then we monitor the Federal Transportation Reauthorization Acts. The FAST Act is the current act. It's Fixing America's Surface Transportation System. And so, that's it's up for reauthorization now, and it will probably get done by September. That's when it expires. It was extended a year. So we're involved in just making sure that our ideas and concepts and positions are considered as the act is being written. On environmental policy, we are running the electric vehicle incentive program, the Mileage Smart and emission repairs programs. We help, working with the legislature, we help develop those programs and design them, and then my bureau sort of takes on the actual day-to-day management of those, and as simple as approving the invoices that come in from the different distributors through the utilities, and then tracking and reporting on all of that. We assist other agencies with the VW settlement and the EV charging grants, the electric vehicle charging grants. We generate a transportation energy profile every 2 years. We do climate change policy and interagency coordination around climate change and other issues. We're not doing quite as much in water quality recently because there was a huge effort maybe 4 or 5 years ago with the Water Quality Act, and it's mostly being implemented. But when there is more policy work on water quality, it'll be done in my group. And also wildlife planning. Over the last several years, we've been evaluating different techniques to get the critters underneath the roads, so to connect different forest blocks and to kind of help preserve the species for the long term.
Joe?
Yes.
Go ahead, Senator
I had a couple questions in this slide. Can you give me a quick reminder what the transportation energy profile is? Is that of all Vermonters' use or just AOT's use?
No, it's the whole state.
Okay.
And it's done every couple of years. So, it looks at the vehicle fleet, how much gasoline is consumed. There's There's information there on greenhouse gas emissions, just all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, and then I assume, I don't know if it would be you or somebody, it would be great to get a more detailed update at some point about the electric vehicle incentive program, but also the Mileage Smart and the emissions repair programs that Capstone is doing.
Yes, and I'm sure that's on the list of testimony. And I know Dan Dutcher also is just wrapping up a report that's required to the legislature on what the status of those are. So I think that'll be a bit of.
Anytime any members of the committee want some added information, just Liz will take the notes on it and schedule folks to. We are recovering some. Yes.
Did not stay to form a perfect union.
Yeah,
They did not claim.
he's
that
being
our
frozen.
Okay. All right. Okay. What was that all about? All right.
Who knows?
Who
What
knows?
did you do, Andy?
Okay. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then our research section, two people strong, they get a ton of work done every year. So our research program is federally mandated. We have, this last year, we completed 5 research projects, and we have 9 active projects right now. And the graphic on the left just shows you a few examples. One is evaluating the use of radio frequency identification technology to do our inventories of signs and guardrail and other sort of roadsides, appurtenances, if you will, sort of those, there's so many of those, and we just need an efficient way to identify them and track them and what their condition is. So we test the methodology for doing that. Also, innovative ways of testing the condition of bridges, using fiber optic, cabling inside the actual concrete that can evaluate cracking and what's going on with it. The unmanned aerial systems, the drones, using those for different techniques, like inspecting bridges, looking at the situational awareness after floods, and then looking at what happens if we upsize a bridge or a culvert. What are the impacts downstream? There's network impacts, on the river and other infrastructure downstream. And so developing a model that can predict what's going to happen when we try to make one bridge bigger to deal with its flood issue. We don't want to cause other issues downstream. So we do technical transfer, which is really just about making sure the research that we do gets put in place when it's good research, when it comes up with results that we can apply. And one of the things that we do is we always make sure there's an agency champion for each research project. So we're not just funding, university research. We're making sure that there's somebody at the agency that really is excited about this idea and wants to try to take it forward. As I think I talked about in the strategic plan, we work with the University of Vermont and a transportation collaborative, as well as other universities in New England in particular. And we also allow some consultants to bid on our research projects. So it is a competitive process when we come up with research ideas. And then we team with the other 6 New England states on it's called the New England Transportation Consortium. So we're able to pool our funds with the 5 other states, and then we do research together on topics that's of interest to the entire region. And then we also participate at the Transportation Research Board. It's a huge organization that does national research, and we can help guide that research on a national level, and we participate in it. And same thing with AASHTO. AASHTO has kind of a research arm, and all that coordinates together. So we have our research program is really robust, and it's been really successful the last few years. And then we have the mapping section. And I know most of you know Jonathan Croft, who's just he's a treasure in all the work that he's done over so many years. And they generate the town highway maps and the annual town highway mileage certificates, which are the basis for the formula funding that goes to towns. They maintain a bunch of data on the transportation system that are used by the regions and the municipalities for their planning and their capital planning and all the work that they do. They do all sorts of special projects for the Agency of Transportation, and things like town highway reclassification is something Jonathan is really an expert on when a municipality wants to change the classification of its roads, say from a class 2 to a class 3 to a class 2, and there's a statutory process that has to go through. They have to go through, or even if they want to discontinue a road, which sometimes happens, and so he's kind of the go-to person, and he provides expert advice and support at the local level. And then last but not least are the permitting services. The first part of that are the permits for access to state highways. So this is like for a new driveway, or even if there's utility work in our right of way. And the graphic there kind of below that bullet shows what we're trying to do with access management is often reduce the number of conflicts along a roadway, so it's more efficient.
Exit 16 in Winooski that we've been on for 10 years now. That's still in the permitting, I guess. God.
Yeah, right. And that's not our permit though.
No. Okay.
That's
God. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I think that one's getting closer though.
Oh, I hope so. I've been hearing that since I was a kid. So.
And we comment on Act 250 projects by developers that, we look at all the issues as well. We look at traffic issues, safety issues, access to transit. And, like one of the issues that's coming up often is there'll be like a facility being built along a transit route. And, it might be a facility that is going to serve older people or people with needs, and they don't have a canopy that's high enough for a transit vehicle to fit under it, right? So it seems like, an obvious thing, but we're catching those sorts of things. And usually it's not a big deal. The developers find with, changes like that, as well as we're making comments on when we think there's needs for bike and ped improvements as well. And then finally, there's the Act 145 Transportation Impact Fee, which has been in place since 2014. And what the map shows on the right is the red dots show transportation projects that we're collecting transportation impact fees on. And the yellow showed transportation projects where we've calculated a fee and it's an eligible project, but we haven't charged anybody yet. And then green are other projects that are also eligible. And if you look in the upper right corner, that's actually in Derby, you'll see a blue dot next to a red dot. And the blue dot is an improvement that a developer made. It was actually Jeff Davis for the Walmart up in Derby. And he installed a traffic signal at a ramp at I-91. And since he paid for the traffic signal, he has the ability to collect fees from other developers. So it's not just the state or a municipality that can collect a fee, but a developer as well if they make the upfront investment. So the program's been going pretty well for 5 years. We've collected about $1.15 million in that time frame. And, so it keeps going along and it's institutionalized and it's working well. And the last thing I put in my slides, and you can't read this, but it's just the contact information for everybody that's in my section. If you need, feel free to contact them directly or contact me if you have any specific questions about anything.
Any questions this morning? Good overview. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, I think that's about all this morning we're going to do. And we'll continue our discussion tomorrow. Unless there's any
Just 1
questions.
minute.
Yes.
Amy will reschedule.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anything else this morning, or we'll be on the floor? Yes, Senator Ingalls.
Senator Miles, I apologize for asking. Do we have Senate floor today at 1?
At 1 o'clock.
Okay,
1 o'clock.
thank you.
Yep. So give you a chance to have a bite to eat and get back on at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.